Licorice Pizza is writer and director Paul Thomas Anderson's newest movie set in 1970s LA, somewhat based off of his own childhood growing up there. And the movie follows the relationship between Gary Valentine, a 15-year-old entrepreneur slash actor, and Alana Kane, a 25-year-old waiting for her life to start. The movie starts with Gary asking her on a date and her calling his bluff by going on it. Then follows how their complicated friendship develops from there. Now, I loved this movie. I had very high expectations considering it was Paul Thomas Anderson. He's made some of my favorite movies of all time. So, in my mind, anytime he makes a new movie, he has bars that he's set and that he has to live up to, and he does that here once again. And I think this movie really delivered on a lot of things for me. The movie features some of the strongest debut performances I've ever seen from Cooper Hoffman and especially Alana Haim. They are both incredibly believable and natural in their roles, that as soon as they were both on screen I was drawn into the story. Cooper has a natural ease to his performance that his dad had. While I'm sure there were big expectations for him to live up to, he fills those shoes phenomenally. And Alana gives what is probably my favorite acting performance of the year. A lot of the credit does go to Paul Thomas Anderson's writing and directing, but these two leads especially really elevate the material there. Now, there's this feeling that I had with this movie that I have with a lot of the movies I really love, and that's that everything feels intentional and precise. And that's what I really love to see in movies, is that it does feel like it's Paul Thomas Anderson's movie through and through. It feels like it's exactly what he wanted to make. It feels like his end product that he wants to deliver. And there's something about that feeling watching a movie when like just every aspect of it is that person's movie. Which I've said before with a lot of movies on here. Probably one of the ones that I've talked about a couple times is Edward Yang. And much for the same reason I love Edward Yang, Paul Thomas Anderson's movies feel entirely like a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. I do think this movie's structure is probably most similar to Boogie Nights as far as PTA's filmography goes. It establishes its characters and then just kind of has you experience different situations with them. And not all the scenes are entirely connected or have an overarching story to all of them, but the driving force behind everything in this movie is the relationship between Alana and Gary. And that helps keep the movie fairly simplistic as far as the plot goes and gives these characters room to breathe. And I do think this movie is incredibly well written. The two main characters are some of the most well-rounded characters I've seen in a while. Gary is suave and incredibly charming, making him seem older and maybe more mature than he really is, but he is also still a teenager and lacks self-awareness outside of issues that have to do with himself. There are still some very immature teenage qualities to him, so he is still his age, even though he presents as a more mature person. Alana is older and smarter than Gary, but falls into some of her more immature tendencies around him while she is trying to figure out her own life. And she is painfully aware of the weirdness of their pseudo-romantic relationship. It's incredibly entertaining to watch the dynamic between these two characters adapt and change throughout the story. There's a lot to them, and you want to see all of it. And I do think this is also some of Anderson's best direction. One thing that he's always been really good at that I've really enjoyed is moments of unspoken dialogue communicated with the audience, where you know exactly what the characters are thinking in a situation where it doesn't need to be said, and you trust the audience to figure it out. This movie also has some of my favorite scenes from the last year. There are a handful in here that are just captured so well that one scene in particular gave me chills and just like the pure essence of this feeling of cinema and movies and what I look for in movies personally. And that's one thing I really appreciate about this movie. The entire sequence with Bradley Cooper's character is also enthralling. There's this fantastic setup and payoff that could have just been its own little short film. And this movie is also hilarious. It's one of the funniest movies of last year, and is really well done on all aspects of that. Now, one issue I don't necessarily have with the movie itself as far as how it's done is more conceptually. I do have kind of a hang up on the main plot of the movie. It's kind of hard to explain, but I find it kind of uncomfortable that it is a pseudo-romantic relationship between a 25 and a 15-year-old. However, I will say that as far as that goes, Alana's character especially is very aware that it's weird and that this is going on. And it does a great job at handling this type of situation. So I can't be too upset about it because it does do a good job of handling what this type of dynamic would be. So I more or less have a hang up just conceptually on what the movie is, even though I love it. But as far as the actual movie goes itself, my only real issue is with the pacing towards the end of the movie. I loved the first half of this movie especially. I do think the second half does shift focus away from Gary and Alana's relationship a bit, and I do think the last 30 minutes or so do drag a little bit more than the rest of the movie. It does get to a point where it feels kind of overlong, but it is kind of made up for with its ending, even though that ending is even a little rushed too. And that being said, it's still incredibly well done throughout. The last 30 minutes are still very enthralling and entertaining. And like I said, even with some pacing issues towards the end, the movie is completely entertaining throughout the entire runtime. I do ultimately think this movie is taken to another level with Cooper Hoffman and Alana Haim's performances. Their chemistry and just pure watchability when they're on screen together, it just works wonders. I do think this is one of my favorite movies of the last year. It's easily one of my favorite movies that I've seen recently. And I do think that this is, as far as Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, one of his more accessible ones. I do think it's generally likable, and I would recommend everybody go out and watch Licorice Pizza. So I will be rating Licorice Pizza a 9.5 out of 10. Now what did you guys think about it? Let me know, and I'll be back with another video.